Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Matt Watson. Hi, Matt.
Hey, how's it going?
Just another day in the queue, baby. Queue time is due time.
Is this like day 733 of captivity?
I quit counting a long time ago. I really have. It's like, yeah, definitely quit counting. Now, with us today, we've got we've got an interesting topic, both from the kind of business that our guest has founded, but more so a really, really interesting story. Now, before we get into that, I do want to mention that today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io, helping you build a software development team quickly and affordably. With us today, we have Moby Hayat, who is the co-founder and host of the Online First Summit 2020. It's located in Austin, Texas. Now, I love it when all of you are interactive. So go on the internets and go to onlinefirstsummit.com so you can have some idea what we're talking about. Moby, hello, and hello to Austin. How are you today, sir?
I am good. It's good to be here on this podcast. Thank you for having me, and happy Monday.
Yeah, and we're very glad to, I'll tell you what, at Startup Hustle, we certainly appreciate a good story. And we really love a good story about startups, and we really, really love a good story about Startup Hustle, which is pretty much your overall story. Where would you like to start, sir?
Absolutely. I'll just start by giving some quick context for the listeners and you. So I moved to the U.S. in 2010 from Pakistan. And that was my first time in the U.S. And that's where it all started. I moved here for college. And it was like, okay, I'm here in the U.S., supposed to get a good education. I came to college, was horrible in college. Absolutely horrible. I got expelled twice. Deserved it both times. Oh, I almost got expelled. Sorry, I almost got expelled. Deserved it both times. Luckily, they let me go. But in college, I got the entrepreneurial startup bug. And there were few reasons. I know a lot of people, especially you hear about them, it's like you want to start a business, you want to have a startup because it's slightly glorified, right? You are up on TechCrunch, you see the headlines, you're like, oh, someone's an entrepreneur, someone's a CEO, blah, 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 blah. So that was where my journey started. When in college, I realized I suck at college. I want to find something else that I'm good at to do. And I also honestly wanted that validation from people. That was my start into the entrepreneurial world. Like, oh, I want some validation. People say, I'm amazing at this stuff. And from there, the whole thing.
You had this all wrong.
Completely. Oh my goodness. I was an idiot. I still am. But that's where
it's like, I want to be a rock star, but I don't understand how hard it was to get there.
And
all the stress of it.
I want to go on record as also saying that I suck at college. I've been to 5 of them, and now I'm a junior.
Nice. We're in the same boat.
Yeah.
College.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. But so that's where the first thing happened, where I wanted to start a business in college, and the U.S. government said, shut your mouth. You are an immigrant on a visa. You cannot start a business in college. No. Take your classes, find a job at like the Taco Cabana at school, and then finish your school. That's where, and I got into web development and starting building stuff in like 2012 for free because I couldn't.
The government said, don't create any jobs, don't pay any tax revenue.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it was illegal for me to have something outside of college.
Okay, so now we've established that you suck at college, perhaps.
Yes.
By the way, does not, in my opinion, doesn't mean shit as to whether or not you're going to be successful or not. And I don't want to downplay the value of education, but I mentioned, I've dropped out of 5 schools. the most recent one, which was a long time ago, I was in a very productive, I was actually in a top 10 business school, but I had a great idea that ended up being a business that I ran for the next 8 years that led to the stuff that we do now. So that, I think I talk to a lot of people that sometimes feel that they are limited or have missed out on something, or they're at a disadvantage because they didn't graduate from college. That is not necessarily the case when it comes to entrepreneurship.
Agree. I agree. I think the value of college is being in an environment in which everybody is figuring it out and getting that education. But if you're out there doing something for yourself, I don't think you need to go to college. I needed it because I needed to get into the US. So that's why I went to college. And that's literally why I went to grad school, for a green card. But that's a later story. So I got into college, got into this whole situation, and then I found myself looking at entrepreneurship, got involved with an organization called 3-Day Startup, in which they teach students how to do entrepreneurship. I was like, okay, one day I'll have a business. Graduated college, found a job at Dell, took the first job I had, and got the visa for Dell. And I wanted to start a business while working at Dell as a 20-something-year-old. And I was like, I'll do the immigrant dream. Building a business while working a day job. And the US government said, shut your fucking mouth. Until you get a green card, you cannot legally make money outside of your day job. And that was the defining moment where, like, it was 2-3 months of just me being like, I don't know what to do. Like, I just partied, I went out, spent all my money. And I came back and decided I did the only thing that was legal for me, which was making content about entrepreneurship by interviewing people just like you are. I interviewed people who were starting businesses in Austin, who led organizations, who led people in Austin. And that was the cornerstone of my entrepreneurial journey, making content about podcasting. And that turned into live streaming for Entrepreneur Media, for Media Tech Ventures, making videos, making content about entrepreneurship, building a personal brand in this space, and help people win money about $800,000 on stage at pitch competitions. And in 2019, I got my visa. I got my green card. So 9 years after being in the US, I got my visa and jumped into an online course, became the head of a startup accelerator in Texas, managed their accelerator. And this is for the audience, just to give context, did that for 4 months, started an online course, had a micro conference on the side, then got laid off. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start an online summit because that's where the future is going to be. And that's my big story in a nutshell. We can jump into whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, I want to go back a little bit. So, so we actually had a prior guest, and this was probably a year ago, that had a similar story. And, he had come from, it was South America.
Yeah.
And he had gone through similar things. He'd come here to be a student and run into a myriad of different problems. I'd like to first start by, I think, you mentioned the dream, the quote, American dream, which you referred to actually as an immigrant dream. But there are a lot of people that move here with just wanting to move to the United States. They run into some roadblocks when it comes to starting a business. What is the process? I mean, so when you said you just recently received your green card, and congratulations and welcome for good. So is that the very first requirement? Like what things were you officially limited from without the green card? Like, are you not able to form an entity or do certain things, or like what are the true restrictions there that you had to wait for that card to get around?
Great question. So if you are on a student visa in college, or you're on a work visa, which is the H-1B traditionally, and that's the one that our president really hates, your limitations are you cannot, outside of the place that gets you the visa, you cannot own a business and be employed by it. So I could own a business but not work for it. But outside of Dell, for example, I know. So I could own a business.
That's weird. Matt, did you even know that was the case?
I work for my business I own.
Yeah, but you're a citizen. That's what he was saying. Is without the green card, he was able to. That's odd. You could open and own a business, but not work at it.
Well, maybe that's a loophole. Maybe that's one of those loopholes they try and close down to say, like, you're trying to illegally immigrate, and that's like a loophole to illegally get a visa.
Starting your own company and then employing yourself. I see. Okay.
Maybe.
All right. Yeah.
And the workaround actually is that if you want to work for your own company, you have to own less than 50% of the company. You have to get the business plan approved by an immigration officer. You have to have funding, so you can't really bootstrap and experiment. And you have to be able to be fired. So you cannot be the final decision maker in your position. If no one can fire you, can't happen.
So we can add some interesting context to this because Matt and I own Fullscale at fullscale.io, the sponsor of today's show. And we have a large number, we have 183 employees in the Philippines. And so not from the US business ownership perspective, but we had to open 2 years ago, we had to open a corporation in the Philippines in order to be a legal employer and put people, give HMO and real paychecks and pay taxes. And we had to jump through some hoops ourselves. In the Philippines, you mentioned not owning, you had to own less than 50% of the business. Well, we have to have 3 out of 5, or the majority of the quote original founding members and board of directors had to be Filipino citizens.
Huh.
So, and the restriction exists to keep foreign companies from coming in or foreign people from buying everything. So in the Philippines, we can't, well, as individuals, at the time, we couldn't have bought property or anything like that. Now, they have some ways that you can structure it a little differently after you've set up the company and different stuff. But yeah, we got pretty familiar with some of the things, including and here's the thing is I'll be the first to admit that as a lifetime American citizen, I mean, I'm a white dude from Kansas. Like, I'm about as stereotypical as it might seem for 44-year-old suburban dudes, but I remember specifically experiencing my first real exposure to like business prejudice when we were reaching out to banks. Yeah. And literally a bank told us that they didn't want our account because we were a US owned business.
Wow.
Which would,
yeah.
So it wasn't that straightforward. Apparently they had some kind of threshold that they wanted to operate with, and we may have put them over it, but the way that they phrased it was, it was really, like, honestly, the first time I had really experienced that.
Yeah.
And, so what do you remember that, Matt?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And, and Matt, didn't you go through something similar renting a condo?
Yes. Yeah. So I was going there every few weeks. And so I wanted to rent a condo. And as soon as they figured out I was American, they wanted me to pay like 3 months deposit up front plus a security deposit or something like that.
Wow.
But until when they didn't know I was American, they didn't require any of that. But as soon as they figured out I was American, they wanted all these additional deposits. I'm like, nope, I'll find another condo.
So what are some of the things that, Moby, there have to be a ton of things that were givens for us opening a business as American citizens. What were some things, like, obviously you mentioned some of the, had to be less than 50% or anything like that. Did you run into some other things like that? I'll give you an example. As we went to start our business in the Philippines, we had to register for what they call an SEC number, which is like an EIN here. It took us over 4 months to get that back. And without it, we couldn't do like 10 other things. Like, we couldn't even open a bank account.
Yeah.
So, and so I would imagine that there was probably a few or interesting little restrictions that came with non-citizenship past what you had already mentioned. What do you have some interesting stories there?
Yeah. So the big requirement, the big statement that would have made me out of status on my visa would have been, if I'm conducting work outside of the day job, which a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident would be getting paid for, that would have been bad for my situation. So everything I did, a lot of it, like I did it for free, and I made sure in all my social media, in all public conversations, it was classified as a hobby. I would mentor people and win, like, it was almost $800,000. And I was like, no, I'm just mentoring for free because I'm volunteering. Anybody that I would help, anybody whose website I would talk about, the podcast, I very publicly and also internalized that it's a hobby. So that if the US government finds out, I can very truthfully come in front of a hard-ass immigration officer and say, I have done nothing illegal. I never posted on LinkedIn about anything that I was doing. It was all Facebook and Instagram, like the podcast, interviewing the mayor, interviewing director of South by Southwest, entrepreneur network. It was all like, this is a hobby. So it was honestly, a lot of it was, not a lot of it, but a part of it was living in some sort of fear. I would call an immigration officer, an immigration lawyer every 3-4 months, like, hey, I'm doing this now, like for fun, for the hobby. Is that illegal? And he would give the lawyer answer. He was great. And he would say, it depends. And so I would have to always say.
It sounds like a very lawyer answer. It depends who you ask.
Yeah. He was fantastic. But I did live in a lot of fear, like, because I had this itch to build something, whether that was a podcast or a personal brand or anything or a business, which I couldn't. I had to make sure I classified that publicly as a hobby. It was never seen by anybody to be doing something which would have made it illegal in the government's eyes. And
would you like to mention the name? You can mention the name of your podcast. I mean, if you want to suggest where that could be listened to, go ahead.
Absolutely. So I started off with a podcast called the Austin Fire Show, and then I went and started the Fire Show, which is a podcast of kind of like how I built this in Austin and talking about Austin's tech ecosystem, how certain people who are really good at what they do in one aspect of business, whether that's sales, operation, leadership, organizations, how they do what they do. So it's very tactical. And it's got the mayor on there, director of South by Southwest, Texas Woman Entrepreneur of the Year. And it was probably one of the best things I've ever done, hosting a podcast. So as you all know, it just works on so many different levels.
Are you still doing it today?
Yeah, not as much. I'm a little bored. I make more videos, but yes.
All right. So, that's one of the things, and having our podcast, we just went past our 300th episode, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But it's, there's no way we'd be able to do what we do at the volume we do it if we didn't have our own support mechanism, meaning like today's podcast will, once we hit stop and send it up to the cloud, we have, as a part of our 183 employees in the Philippines, we have 8 people in a marketing department there, and also a couple people here, which do a lot of other different stuff, but process this along the way. As starting a podcast is something that anybody can do, and for a very low barrier to entry. What were some of the benefits that you have found from starting your show?
That's a great question. And also, by the way, my VA is also in the Philippines. They're awesome.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, yeah. Onlinejobs.ph. That's where I found them. So your question was the benefits or what I saw from hosting a podcast, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think a podcast is a great way, or a blog, any kind of interview thing is a great way to leverage that asset to meet people that are not likely to give you the time of day. Like when I got to the mayor, I was like, why is he sitting down with me? That's so stupid. But I had a podcast and I could reach out to people and say, hey, I want to interview you. And everyone loves being interviewed on a podcast. And what was really happening was I was just building a relationship with them. It was all these things of relationship with this person I interviewed, relationship. And the podcast was a way to bring them into my network. And by asking them questions, being interested, I made them feel liked, and they ended up liking me. So anything I did later on, whether that was events, this online summit with 60 plus speakers, a micro conference, an online course, I could always reach out for support from them. Be like, hey, I'm doing this. And I just have this excuse to meet people. The online summit, do you know Noah Kagan?
No.
He's a big Austin startup dude, and I got him because of the summit. I'm like, hey, do you want to be a keynote? He's like, yeah. So it's just a great way to meet people and also learn it's a great way to get into content and building a personal brand, because a podcast, when you're starting out, you're right, low barrier of entry. You don't have to show your face. You can ask the questions, and over time, it can turn into this thing of, oh, you're making video, you're live streaming, you're writing blogs, you might make a course, you might make a platform based on content. So I think podcasting is a great place to start and keep doing it if you love it. But like you said, if you don't have processes set up, it's going to drain the life out of you constantly.
Yeah, I can definitely, like, that's something that we've developed. We're highly proficient at the production line, but that's because we have a variety of different people that do a variety of different things that all kind of touch it at the point that it needs to be, done at. Now, at one point, I mean, that was me. And it took up a lot of the time for those that want to just kind of hustle harder and do something like a podcast or any other kind of stuff. If you're trying to do interview media, I talk to people have asked me a lot. They're like, well, how do you get guests? I'm like, it's not as hard as you think.
Yep.
And it's based on the concept that people like to talk about themselves. So give them the opportunity to do that, and you might find that to be the case. I couldn't agree with you more about the interesting relationships that you end up building. Prior to the Startup Hustle podcast, I had learned that because, well, Matt and I know each other primarily, became friends and then business partners later, but that started with me interviewing him for my book, $1 Million Bedroom.
Nice.
And that just, it was just, there's like a different kind of bond. And the thing is and my recommendation is, if you do start a podcast and you want to have other people on it, then, make your stuff centric around what they're doing, much like this. If you want to learn more about the company that Moby Hayat is running and has operated, you can go to onlinefirstsummit.com. And just that overall engaging part of it. And really, if you're worried about it, so many people say, I don't know, I've been working on an outline. I'm trying to come up with content. Write 6 words down about something you're a subject matter expert on and start talking about it into a microphone.
Yep.
That's how that works. Or do the same thing here. Like, for example, at Startup Hustle, like this episode is built around your story, which has been written or is forecast in the future and does not require me to have a whole lot of notes about it. And then sometimes we share those notes with Matt Watson, who openly admitted earlier that he didn't even read them. So, okay. So look, now all of this, in order for a hustle story, and Moby will tell you if off air, and I'm going to quote him now, because I'm not a success story, I'm a hustle story. Well, there's not a whole lot of success stories that aren't also hustle stories. I mean, does anyone disagree with that?
It all requires a little bit of hustle and a little bit of luck somewhere along the way.
True.
See, I'm not a believer in luck, though, because I think as you're hustling, you're preparing for that moment where you may see some opportunity. Now, luck is our blue collar layman's term for that. But, people have said to me, they're like, oh, you're lucky. You do this and do that. I'm like, dude, there's not luck. It was a shitload of hustle. I wasn't lucky last week when I worked 84 hours.
Karma came around my way.
Better.
However you want to describe it.
True.
Well, but the point is if you're not prepared, all right, so we're going to talk, we'll talk about onlinefirstsummit.com. And, here's the thing, man, it's like you mentioned, like if you were preparing for that prior, or you had, now, is this a company you founded?
Yeah. So, comment about your luck. Sorry. So I totally agree with you. It's what I think about it, a serendipity. So for example, I was taking the day off from my day job once. It was my lunch break. I was podcasting at a co-working space. I podcasted, walked out to go back to the day job. I ran into somebody and said, hey, can I help you coach the people who are at your co-working space, help them with their pitches? He said yes. That resulted in a $360,000 win for somebody. That got me mentorship for something else. I help other people win money. And that one interaction might not be luck, might just be serendipity. The fact that I was prepared to ask that question, I ran into that person, and that led to a chain of events which worked. So yeah, the hard work.
Before we get into Online First Summits, Watson has a very similar story, related to that about Matt, I think you should take 1 minute and tell the story about how Vince Solutions got started due to a skipped lunch break.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was selling computers at Sears. And everybody would come in and buy a computer, and I'd ask them what they needed the computer for, because I was trying to figure out what to sell them, if they need a laptop or an expensive computer or whatever. And I decided to skip lunch, and while I was working, some car dealer came in, and I ended up helping him with this computer and asked him what he wanted it for, and he told me it was some software for some dealership, but the guy who wrote it was crazy and fled the country, and they were scared shitless that the software was going to stop working and blah, blah, blah. And I said, maybe I can help you with that. And then the rest was history.
Well, and Matt's always modest. That resulted in a company that he exited for $150 million and also still exists in Kansas City with 500 full-time employees. So, now you talk about the weird stuff. I mean, if Matt had gone to lunch today or that day, he might be working at Sears, wondering if he has a job. He's trying to get out of the computer department. And what do I need to do to sell tools?
Yeah.
So back to your online summits. So onlinefirstsummit.com, and let's talk about that. Like, what made you want to get into that, and what's the problem that you're solving?
Absolutely. So when I got the green card in 2019, right, I was like, okay, I have the legal ability to start a business. And what do? I didn't have enough revenue from, I made a course, hosted some workshops, was getting some revenue, but didn't have enough revenue to make it full time. And I was also scared to go full time on it. So I took a job as a manager of a startup accelerator, helping people raise money and just help them meet investors, get some mentorship. On the side, I kept doing stuff. From November, December, January, February 2020, I just kept doing stuff on the side while working this job. And I told myself, this job is for a year and a half. That's it. And then I would leave. March 2020 happened. We're in Austin, so South by, a festival in which 100,000 people come in. That got canceled. The startup accelerator I worked at also had a co-working space. Co-working died because no one wants to sit next to each other now. And all Q2 and Q3 events got canceled, and sponsorship revenue went down the drain for the company I was working at. Then they got 95 of us on a call and furloughed and laid off half of them within 2 weeks of this thing. And I remember looking at the screen after the call happened, and the first thing was, oh my God, I got to find a new job. Oh my God, I updated my resume super quick. I cut my expenses. But then I took a day and I thought, I looked at my finances. I have enough runway to last for a bit. And also, I don't have to find a new job. Like, I've always wanted to go out on my own and build something. And I've made some money outside of that. Why don't I take this time to go full time into something and try something that I think is going to work? And I had been reading this book called Surge, which is about riding a wave of something that comes on. Now it's getting this itch even before I got laid off, which is virtual is happening because of COVID. It is the thing. It is the thing. And I looked and said, one of my friends was hosting an online summit. He asked me for help. I looked at his platform. I was like, shit, I can do this. And so within 15 days, we had got 50 speakers, topics, and a platform set up to be like, we're going to try this. And if it succeeds, I'm going to take it further. I also took on coaching and helping people with their content. But already we've got, almost 20 days in after we got the idea. We broke even. We got some sponsorship. We have 63 speakers. We've got a great keynote. And I have already got a lead for a consulting thing on a virtual conference for a nonprofit. A nonprofit that actually makes money and can actually pay. So somehow this combination of being laid off and building something which I think is going to be the future put me in a position to be like, this might actually work for a bit. And I might turn my business, it's a product, not a business. It might be that I'm a virtual conference consultant, or we host these every 2 months, or the podcast and the conference merge together. We're still trying to figure it out, but our goal is just to hustle the hell out of this for the next 20 days and see what happens.
So when it comes to the speakers and the topics, what's the range? Like, drop a few subject matters on us.
Absolutely. So the problem that we're trying to solve and looking at our customers psychographically is March and April would have been a month for small to medium-sized businesses and startups, which fucking sucked. It would have been grim, sobering. There would have been pay cuts, layoffs, budget cuts, furloughs, loss in revenue. And I believe that the future is 100% digital first, right? It reminds me of that phrase, mobile first. So people who are building business models and selling products and services digitally, or can just deliver digitally first, even if it's physical products or food or whatever, those are the people who are going to survive if social distancing lasts for another 6 months, hopefully not, or if it comes back, or something else happens. And we're bringing 60 people who are building these kinds of businesses to show you what kind of business models work online, how to actually get customers if you're building something, how to pivot to a different business model, and how to prepare for a future that no one knows what the hell is going to happen. We just want to help people. We want to help people get back on their feet and actually kick ass, because so many people are growing right now, absolutely growing. And why not other people? So we're trying to bring that in 4 days with about 40 talks by 60 speakers.
And if we want to, and we can sign up for that, or a listener can sign up for that going to onlinefirstsummit.com.
Yes, onlinefirstsummit.com. We've got.
There you go.
It is. We are gating the content, so it's $35, so that anyone who registers, they have skin in the game and they care enough to actually pay a little bit just to be like, yeah, I want this content, versus just bad leads for us.
So so do you think that honestly, to me, it sounds like this is probably going to result more in a sharp increase in consultative revenue for you, just meaning like you mentioned, and you're doing, by the way, I want to say you're doing it right. And if those of you listening have wanted to understand, I'll talk to people about podcasts, and I at this point I can't go to, well, when you could go to events where people were there, it would be all the Startup Hustle podcast is like all I talk about with people. They all just have so many different questions. I gave a presentation at Global Entrepreneurship Week about starting a podcast, and the very first thing I did was I asked the whole room. I said, "How many of you want to start a podcast because you think it's going to become? You think that it will generate enough ad or sponsor revenue for you to not have to do another job?" And Moby's laughing, and I can see him like with the face palm kind of moment, because that's not what is going to happen with your podcast, not for a while, and maybe never. And that's the wrong approach to go about it. Instead, it's about creating value and hype related to your own business, your own services, your own things, and stuff like that. And the consultative play of it is there's so many people that want to create content, but really just don't know how. Or maybe they just need someone to tip them, push them over the edge, or do something like that. And, like when it comes to creating content, I mean, Nike has it right when they say, just do it. Like you gotta, if you're not, they're like, well, I'm not sure my first episode's that great. Nobody's is. Nobody's is. If we went back and if I go back, I can't even stomach going back and listening to the first Startup Hustle episode, even from a sound quality to all of it, but you got to get started somewhere. So when you're consulting or trying to teach people about content creation related to their brand, and there's a lot of people that believe the modern brand also operates somewhat like its own tiny media company. And I agree. That's what we do at Full Scale. It's what we do at Startup Hustle. What are a few things what are your kind of cardinal rules that you've got related to creating content? I mean, mine are, you got to be genuine. You got to have something to offer. It has to be more about other people and other things and helping people get what they want, not just about you. Because even if your story is 10 miles deep and 100 miles wide, it has an end. And that's a different kind of show. And then it's also, as you mentioned, like the ability to create relationships with interesting and engaging people, in my opinion, is where the most value can come for a lot of people. So What are your first 5 or so rules?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's about what other people want and providing some sort of value. And that could be, for example, with podcasting, when I think about content, the first thing is value. So I'm interviewing somebody that if someone else is listening, they get something that they can use in their life. Or if it's a video and it's still about me, I make it entertaining and the person wants to watch, whether they know it's just going to be funny for a bit or it's going to be super useful. It has to be about what the other person wants. So this fine line between not making it yourself, but being yourself and showing your personality and not being egotistical about it. Because I think it's a very easy thing to do, which is making videos, making podcasts, and somehow centering it around you versus your perspective on the topic that you talk about and giving people value through that. The one thing I think about most with content is also, it's like I use a coworker analogy. There's two kinds of people who usually make content. There's one person who's like a coworker who you only run into once a month in the hallway, and they talk at you for 30 minutes, and they expect you to listen, and you're bored, and you can't get away, and you're like, when is this asshole going to stop talking to me? Like, I never see this person otherwise. On the other side, there's this other person who makes content who's like the coworker you see all the time, and you cross hallways every 2-3 days. They say hi, you have a quick exchange, and you leave. I personally believe you have a better relationship with a person you see more frequently. They just ask you how you are. They give an update about your life. And over months, over time, you build this weird relationship with them where you're like, oh, how was that thing that you talked about 2 months ago? Oh, I know you went this weekend and did this. I like making content for a minute or two for videos and giving them a quick update, giving them quick value 1, 2, 3 times a week, rather than a 10-minute video on a Friday, which is just me vomiting what I think I believe about the world. Because no one cares. When was the last time you finished a 10-minute video? I listened to once, and that was for my friend, and it was great. But other than that, no. People just don't do it. So I think frequency and smaller content with either value or entertainment is better than boring, look at what I know, 10-minute videos posted on LinkedIn, asking people to support. Because we see ads all the time. And it's not like we say this person's bad or this person doesn't know what they're saying. It's like bullshit, I don't care. But if you package into something smaller that they get used to getting entertainment and value from, I think that's fun. And I'm leaning more towards humor these days while I talk about the summit. Because I can talk about the summit all the time. But if I say the same thing on video or live stream all the time, people will be like, stop talking. They would unfollow me right away. So I have to find new ways to package that.
Well, speaking of entertainment and humor, it is actually time for us to play Mixtape the Game.
Yeah.
So Moby, if you haven't played Mixtape the Game, anybody listening can find it at mixtapethegame.com. You can also download the app for iOS or Android. I have pulled a card out of the Mixtape deck. I am going to read a scenario in which everyone is going to then name whatever song they think best fits that scenario. We will vote to see who the winner is. You may not vote for yourself. Moby, are you prepared to play Mixtape with us?
Let's do it.
All right, here's the card. If your company had a theme song, what would it be? Watson, you will have to, I will answer on behalf of Full Scale, and you will work for Stackify. I'm going with Eye of the Tiger. Is that by Survivor? Maybe. Everyone knows Eye of the Tiger. Yeah. And I'm gonna give an explainer. It's because Full Scale was 10 years ago a different company that has had the heart and the eye of the tiger over a long decade.
Yeah. I gotta go with White and Nerdy by Weird Al Yankovic.
Honestly, that's very appropriate.
I like that.
It's one of my favorite songs. So
it is a dope song. I would probably
it's also written about you, Matt.
Yeah.
I would probably pick Led Zeppelin's Immigrant song, not because of the name, but because of how pumped up I get because of it. I love that song. The name is stupid.
It's also very. I'm giving that my vote actually, because once again, congratulations on the story, and I love that song. Matt, who's your vote going to?
All right, let's repeat. What do we got again?
Eye of the Tiger.
Okay.
And he's got the Immigrant song by Led Zeppelin,
I don't know that song.
Come from the land of the ice and snow over the midnight sun.
Okay. Yeah, I got to vote for that, and I don't like voting for you anyways.
Was it my singing?
Yeah, your singing was awful.
A lot of people listening will think that Robert Plant was here. Congratulations, Moby. You're the winner of Mixtape the Game on this episode of Startup Hustle. Now, once again, with us today, Moby Hayat, a man who does many different things. If you want to learn more about Moby, you can find him on Instagram. I love the handle, Not That Moby. Same with Twitter. I mentioned earlier, I've been telling people all week that we were going to record an episode of Startup Hustle with Moby. For those of you that are wondering when we're going to talk about EDM, never.
It's not happening.
So as we conclude this episode of I almost said Mixtape the Game, of Startup Hustle, we end with the Founders Freestyle. Moby, you've got so many different things that we've talked about and covered, and thank you for sharing your interesting story and outlook with us. If you have anywhere up to, let's say, a minute to lay out whatever you would like to say to our listening audience, can be about anything you want, brother.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, just fucking make
freestyle.
Boom. I would just tell them to make content. Let's make videos as much as possible, get good at it, have fun with it. Because if people watch your content over time, especially as you build a business, they become invested in it. They tell other people about it, especially if it's good video content. And that is just free organic marketing. We haven't marketed one bit outside of organic marketing for the summit, and we get inbound for speakers all the time. So just make video content, please. That's it.
Mr. Watson?
I think what you guys are trying to do with the online summits is awesome. I used to go to Microsoft Build every year, which is in the last few years has been in the Seattle area. And it costs like $2,000 to go, or you can stream the entire thing online for free.
Wow.
And I just wonder how all these conferences are going to survive, going forward. Of all forms, right? All industries, all sorts of things. And are we going to make this radical shift now to where everything is online and we just kind of never go back? I don't know. It's going to be really fascinating. And so I definitely think there's a big future with what you're trying to do, and really wish you guys luck.
Thank you.
So, and I'll round this out once again with us today, Moby Hayat, a man who wears many hats. As we can say, find him on the gram at Not That Moby. Once again, today's episode of Startup Hustle was sponsored by Fullscale.io, helping you build a software development team quickly and affordably. You can also find today's episode on the Startup Hustle YouTube channel, and we're on the gram as well at Startup Hustle Podcast, where we sometimes post our own faces that are best meant for radio. So, overall, man, like in an episode that started about the hustle required to set up any business as an immigrant, we quickly turned into the conversation about content and organic marketing. I couldn't feel stronger about the subject. I've been doing it for years, having written 3 books. I came to podcasting because I had been trying to build my own YouTube channel after working with a brand influencer who made it look really easy. I realized with podcasting that the people that were listening didn't have to give up something else to listen to a podcast. And we mentioned video a lot in this episode, but and you mentioned no one watches that 10-minute video, or a lot of people don't. And that's because if people have to listen to a video, they sometimes have to give something up while they're doing it. Now, that when you have targeted content similar to what you're doing with the online summits, it's very precise, it's subject matter experts, it's not just your own opinion in a lot of cases. And that can lead to longer content. Now, when it comes to creating a podcast, like by the way, since COVID-19 and lockdowns occurred, the podcast podcast listenership has gone down 15 to 20%. Why? Because people listen a lot on their commute. Yep. Or when they're doing different things, when they're at the gym, when they're out doing a lot of stuff. And people will return to doing that stuff. But keep in mind, when you create audio content, like podcasting's the modern day talk radio, you have an amazing reach. We've had listeners in 190 countries. That was the last time. We probably have more. I haven't even checked since the last time. We were running out of countries to find new listeners in. But, I'm recording this out of the guest room in my house right now. Matt's at home. Moby looks like he's at home. And the point is the modern world of technology, whether it's through online summits or podcasting or blogging, it's valid. And it's something that you can do. Now, with that, you have to look at it as a long play. If you think you're going to publish 3 podcast episodes, write 2 blogs, and make a video, and you're going to become some kind of social media influencer or have tens of thousands of downloads and web hits, you're not. I mean, the Full Scale blog has over 200 articles in it. We've published 300 podcasts and all that stuff. But you can find, if you make a plan and you start tying all this stuff together, the content supports your other content, supports other stuff. And if you actually make a reasonable plan, you can spread this stuff out and it becomes easier and easier over time.
Well, and because of the podcast, I am now an Instagram model.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
The visuals are stunning.
I don't even know how to fucking respond to that comment. Oh, wow. If you want, Matt, where can we find your Instagram modeling?
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So there's no one with more likes on Instagram than you, Watson.
That's me.
For sure. But, the point is all this stuff is accessible and it's something that you can get into. It has a remarkably low barrier of entry. I mean, a decent $99 to $200 mic can get you started and you have some time. And the beautiful thing about creating pre-recorded content is that if it sucks or you mess it up, then erase it and try again. It's that simple. So don't let it scare you. Anyway, thanks again for all you that tuned in. Thanks for checking us out. All the different places you can find us. We'll see you around next time.